Jim, one of the things I've been noticing lately through Facebook posts and emails from the people in our Mastering Alchemy community is a level of discomfort in their guts and their stomachs, and they're saying consistently that there's also a level of resistance. Sometimes they don't call it that, but there's a clear connection between resisting the current events and what they're feeling in their stomach. And so I want to talk about resistance in the third chakra.
Let's do this, but let me set this up.
Yeah.
Let me see if I put it in perspective, it makes sense. Now let me also say that this is an area where we're going to start to play in Mastering Alchemy Light, because in Mastering Alchemy Light gives me much more room to kind of explain this in different detail. But let's talk about three chakras, first, second, and third chakra. And let me say it in a way that you don't normally hear this. The first chakra most people consider is about the survival of the body. That's how we learned it over the last 20, 30, 40 years, survival of the body. What most people don't understand is the ego lives in the first chakra. And the ego is wounded. Now, the ego is an absolutely essential part of you. It's not something you cut away or throw away. It would be like cutting off your arm or your leg. The ego is a huge part of you that's wounded, simple terms. Also, the rational mind doesn't live up here. It lives in that first chakra. And so the rational mind is all about keeping you safe and having you fit in. And so you've got a wounded ego, you've got a mindset that sits in survival, and a rational mind whose job is to keep you safe and fit you in society. So when you put those three things together, you begin to get this apprehension or this pay attention to, or what's around the next corner sense of off-balanceness to start with. Now, to put it in perspective, the first chakra was never about survival. It was about well-being. So if you can live in well-being, which is kind of where all the work we play in goes, you get a very different result than if you live in survival. So the first chakra basically has this apprehension, be aware, pay attention, I'm not sure experience. Second chakra is all about creative expression. It's this space where you say, wouldn't it be great if? But when the first chakra, rational mind, ego, is saying beware, all of a sudden you get this apprehension in the creative expression. And so the creative expression is defensive, off balance, uncertain. It's in the third chakra that in well-being, when you have well-being in the first and this excited creative expression in the second, the third chakra is all about the propulsion, the explosion, making it happen, the yes, this is exciting. But when you have apprehension and creative expression in doubt, uncertainty, then you begin to have a number of factors that play out in the third chakra. So if you ever have third chakra, solar plexus, right where the ribs come together here in the soft part of the stomach, whenever you have an experience of that hurting, if you ask yourself, am I in power or control, judgment or resistance? 4 words. And am I pushing against? Am I being pushed against? Am I resisting it? Am I judging something? Am I trying to control something? 100% answer, yes. One of those 4 factors, or a variation of those 4 factors, are what we are experiencing. So the resistance people are feeling really comes back down into the uncertainty of what am I doing? And then drops into the first chakra, am I safe? And so what is really important in this time, and why I point to Mastering Alchemy Light just as an expression for people to have a place to go, is how do you understand that? And then how do you begin to move around in a way to where you can recognize that, reconfigure it, step out of it, not be engaged with it, but simply recognizing I'm worried about. And most of what people are worried about today have absolutely nothing to do with them. So one of the biggest issues that I'm watching is everybody on the planet is feeling the shift. Now we're 5 years into the shift, and it's beginning to accelerate. It's beginning to take turns and twists and presenting opportunities that are contrary to the status quo. And so you begin to see things starting to happen, or you have a sense of things happening that are different than what I know. And there you go again, right back into the, whoa, what's happening? Mm-hmm. So the world itself is in a state of apprehension. Minus the wars and the geopolitics and the finances, people are in this shift of consciousness. And in this shift, I'm not sure what's going on when the first 3 chakras are structured based on survival.
Well, and just knowing that that resistance and that pain in the body isn't theirs can be helpful to begin the process to release it. If I know that my gut, that this is just energy in my gut that doesn't belong to me, and I can put the word resistance to it, or power, control, judgment, perhaps that's the first step for people to know, I can not go there, I
Sure.
can release it.
So what you're doing is you're becoming conscious of being unconscious. Mm-hmm. Now that sounds like a weird thing in a way, but you basically move through life not really paying attention, just on some level of automatic. It's in that level of automatic that this apprehension or resistance or concern is. So let me even point in another direction here in terms of all those fundamental tools we have on the website in Mastering Alchemy. They're free. They're do this, what happens. They're basically a whole construct of how do you observe, how do you get into present time, how do you discern between what's mine and what's not mine, how do I get very grounded and understand what grounded is. It's these tools that are going to allow the apprehension to be observed, mm-hmm. then chosen as to what to take an action with regard. So observation, choose, and action is very different than unconscious of being unconscious, which often has shoot, ready, aim, and then have to back up and apologize and figure out how to get out of it. So this resistance is very real, but it doesn't have to be yours. Mm-hmm. And this is why we keep pointing to things like the free tools in Mastering Alchemy. Understand, and I'm kind of talking to everybody, understand there is some very significant changes that are right in front of you. And they're beginning to become conscious. And those changes are going to be very surprising to the bulk of the planet. And they aren't things that are not, you're very much capable of dealing with them. But if you wait until they're in your face, that's going to be an awkward place. And so to a great extent, these morning conversations and the fundamental tools and Mastering Alchemy Light and the whole program of how do you really learn to manage yourself and step into a multiple consciousness, dimensional consciousness that provides so much more than the limited unconscious of being unconscious, mm-hmm. that we walk around in.
Yeah.
So that was a bigger piece than just resistance.
It's okay.
But I think that it's getting important. I keep feeling this urgency to say to people, pay attention. There's some very exciting things happening, and some of them are going to interrupt your status quo.
Yeah.
So, until next time.